Now taking over the airwaves.
This is Ultimate U Radio.
So welcome to UI Radio, guys. And today we've got a very special guest. We've got Dr. David Perlmutter on the line. And he's written some incredible books, doing some amazing work. A really, really amazing book that you've obviously written, Grain Brain, one that I've read, enjoyed immensely. And I'm really honored to have you on UI Radio today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Andy, it's my pleasure. Glad to be with you. I just, as you may know, I spent a lot of time in your country and did a lot of touring and really enjoyed the reception that I got personally, but also for the message that we are really trying to get out, and that is that diet matters in terms of health. Who knew?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, to kick us off, I'm a big fan of what you do and your message, of course. Why are you so passionate about, transforming people's health and getting this message out there?
It's a great question, and I think the passion comes from first a level of frustration as a practicing neurologist in that field specifically, really realizing that we weren't helping a lot of people. And here I studied for so long, was in practice for so long, and came to the realization suddenly that, we're pretty much just treating symptoms and ignoring the underlying process. Pretty much like focusing on the smoke, but ignoring the fire. And that was just not acceptable to me. And, I began to come across the literature that really demonstrated quite categorically that lifestyle choices played a huge role in terms of brain health. Who knew? I think we understood that, for example, nutrition might be playing a role if you have a gastrointestinal issue. Maybe a bigger stretch would be relating nutrition to diabetes, and further, a much bigger stress relating nutrition to the heart. But the brain was absolutely off the table. But, I must say that the literature has been there a long time, began to explore it, began to incorporate these ideas into my clinical practice in actually dealing with Alzheimer's, MS, autism, ADHD, and began getting really profound results. So that was very encouraging, because it really was like a phoenix rising from the flames for me, because I was about done with mainstream medicine. So, I realized that the area of neurology, brain science, and its relation to nutrition was a fairly lonely place to be. It isn't now. Now I've got all kinds of great researchers and people doing some terrific work. But I think I had to homeschool myself a bit, because there wasn't a lot of information out there that I could really leverage in terms of the clinical application. So beyond that, I realized that to reach a larger audience, I was going to have to write books and do television and all the media stuff. And I've taken to that really in a good way. I've enjoyed it, because the message has been very, very well greeted, accepted, and incorporated into people's lives. So, here I am talking to you from America, and however many people are going to watch this interview, some percentage of them are going to be moved by it. Yeah. And that's very, very validating for me in terms of my message. It's rewarding that I can reach out and touch a lot of people with, these ideas that our diet matters, our lifestyle matters, the amount of exercise and sleep and compassion in our lives are all relevant in terms of building a better brain. Who knew?
Absolutely. And I've got so much respect for what you've done, because you're one of the true front runners, and I can only imagine there would have been a lot of challenging times in the beginning where you are delving into this space with some different ideas compared to what the mainstream were preaching at the time. And I'm sure you faced a lot of criticism and some barriers along the way. What was that like for you? Discovering these things on the
as far as the criticism goes, if you're not being criticized, then you're status quo. You're not going to move the ball down the field. Yeah, absolutely. So it's really important that there's a level of criticism out there that is challenging, provided it's done in an appropriate way. It's done in an educated academic way, as opposed to just casting aspersions because people don't want to eat gluten-free, and they don't want to give up their sugar and their carbs, and they want to eat crap, basically. So I'm all in for the educated back and forth conversation, the debate based upon scientific literature. I live for that. I don't think anything's to be gained by being derogatory without a foundation. I mean, certainly in America right now, if you see what's going on in politics, it's abhorrent. I mean, it just we don't need to have that type of back and forth as it relates to science and medicine. But I will say that the underpinnings of our science, it turns out, were very, very much tainted for a long, long time. We recently saw an incredible publication in the Journal of the American Medical Association that was actually on the front page of the New York Times, that scientific publications were heavily influenced by the sugar industry, and it began in the late 1960s, and therefore doctors adopted these ideas that somehow sugar was good and fat was bad, and it really derailed us for a long, long time, and I think really caused the premature death around the world, because other countries obviously adopted these ideas as well, of hundreds of thousands of people more than the world wars combined, from people paving the way for chronic degenerative conditions like heart disease, cancer, coronary artery disease, and even Alzheimer's, because they shifted their diets because their doctors told them to, because doctors read the literature that was highly influenced by industry that wanted us to eat sugar and carbs, and they had to pick a scapegoat. They picked fat. Yeah. And the moment we took fat off the table, our health plunged, and our diabetes rates and coronary artery disease rates and Alzheimer's rates have been skyrocketing globally. And I think it's clearly related to this dramatic U-turn that happened in our diets, unlike anything humans have consumed for over 2 million years.
Yeah, so true. It's scary, isn't it? And I mean, I think I heard you say once in another interview that, when you originally were training to be a doctor, you had zero nutritional education in that space, and I'm assuming that most doctors don't have much education in that area, yet they're of course prescribing different diets and things like that without a foundational
I love it. It's true, because when people are deciding to go on a specific diet, whether it's paleo or Atkins or Ornish or whatever du jour diet there is, you'll always notice that they're supposed to check with their doctors ahead of time. Like their doctors are going to have any clue as to what they should be doing. And generally they don't. And I'm not being, disparaging here, but I'm simply saying that the truth of the matter is very few doctors have had any formal training in nutrition whatsoever. Now you contrast that, for example, with chiropractors who get a lot of training in nutrition, and veterinarians who spend a couple of years learning about nutrition and how it affects dogs and cats and horses and cows. But for some reason, we get, all this education in terms of pharmacology, what drugs we should use, how to get people in and out of your office very quickly. And I guess there's a place for that. And there are people who can do that and be satisfied with that. It doesn't work for me because it doesn't work for you. It doesn't work for anybody. And, at the time when we finally come to grips with the notion that we are responsible for our own health, not our doctors. We are the ones who make the choices that are going to keep us healthy or pave the way for disease. In many Western countries, we're kind of lulled into this notion that we should just live our lives come what may, and suddenly when we are a taco short of a combo platter mentally, there's going to be a pill for us. Doesn't exist. And yet, for example, Alzheimer's is almost completely preventable based upon the lifestyle choices that we make. It is not primarily a genetics issue. Yes, you're at increased risk if mom or dad had Alzheimer's, as I am. My dad had Alzheimer's disease, so I'm at increased risk. But I'll tell you right now, I'm offsetting that risk because I am on a ketogenic diet. I'm eating mostly fat and almost no carbohydrate. I exercise very aggressively every day. I've brought compassion into my life, which has some very powerful effects upon the brain. And these are things, I've maximized my vitamin D level. I've lowered my homocysteine level. These are all things that anybody can do that pave the way for a healthy brain and will offset my genetic predisposition not my genetic determination.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And it's so true. You know, I love that point about taking responsibility for your health. I mean, things like this are so important, and books like yours are so important because it makes people question what they're doing, you know, question what their doctors are saying. And I think that any step in that direction is a good step forward, of course. Do you see anything changing?
You know, pardon me, go ahead. I was going to say, you're right. And, you know, the grain brain was the why. Why are carbs and sugar detrimental to your brain and threatening your brain? Why is gluten a threat to the brain? And then Brain Maker was a book about why. Why our gut bacteria play such a fundamental role in keeping us healthy and how our gut bacteria relate to the brain. My new book, which is called The Grain Brain Whole Life Plan, insert the graphic here, is really about how. It's about how do we now leverage this understanding in terms of our day-to-day lives, creating lifestyle plans in terms not just of diet, but in terms of exercise, in terms of sleep hygiene, for example, to really get the most out of life and to extend our health span. You know, everybody's talking about extending your lifespan, but what's the use of living to be really old if you're not around really mentally, for example, to participate in it? So what we've done globally is that when people get our new book, The Grain Brain Whole Life Plan, they will get a free download of our public television program that was based upon the book Grain Brain. They'll learn the science about carbs and sugar and gluten, which, you know, I want to say Grain Brain was written back in 2013. Now, month after month is research appearing that is absolutely driving home the point that eating wheat is detrimental. There was a huge announcement today, as a matter of fact, from a big European conference that showed, for example, that 1/3 of people who have inflammatory bowel disease will have a dramatic improvement if they go gluten-free. That rivals some of the medications. And the point is, these are not people with celiac disease. These are people who have an issue with gluten. And actually, it's not just gluten, but it's a particular enzyme called trypsin, amylase trypsin inhibitor, ATI, and it's that specific enzyme found in wheat that is associated with inflammation, yes, in the gut when you eat wheat, but also in your joints, in your heart, in your brain, throughout your body. So when we talk about inflammation, it's really important to understand that it may begin in the gut, but it is from top to bottom. And it's why, once again, our food choices are the #1 leverage point for regaining and maintaining health.
What do you say to people that argue the point that, you know, we've been eating grains and wheat for thousands of years? How could this be bad for us? You know, what do you say to those people?
I'd say get real. We've been on the planet for 2.3 million years, and we've been eating grain for we've been grain-free pretty much, or at least gluten-free, for 99.96% of our time on this planet. Agriculture began 10,000 years ago. That was 10 seconds ago in our history. It just happened. So, you know, the notion that we've always eaten grain and bread is really untrue. The notion that, well, you know, we've eaten bread, it's in the Bible, for crying out loud. Give us this day our daily bread. Well, I'm not a biblical scholar, but the Bible was written about 2,000 years ago. That's just a few generations back. And, you know, truthfully, our grain consumption now is over the top, especially our gluten consumption is over the top. And here's another really very important point for both us here in the States and for your viewers and listeners as well, and that is that the way grain in general is treated, especially wheat, is very, very threatening to our health. Why do I say that? Because globally, there's been a move to spray wheat with something called glyphosate, which is an herbicide, the active ingredient in Roundup. Now, glyphosate is sprayed on GMO crops, including corn and soy, because these are crops that are resistant to it, so they don't die when they spray them with the herbicide. It kills the weeds, but the corn and the soy are fine. here in America, we don't have GMO wheat, gratefully, but we do continue to spray our wheat with glyphosate to kill off, not necessarily kill off the weeds, but to ripen the wheat more quickly, and so it can get to market more readily. So that said, there are aggressive amounts of this residue of glyphosate on the food that we eat. So much so that we now have seen that our Food and Drug Administration is going to be publishing glyphosate residues that are found in common foods very soon. And the main thing that this glyphosate does is it dramatically damages our gut bacteria, our microbiome, and then sets the stage for inflammation because it increases the permeability or leakiness of the gut. So, in March of 2015, in the journal The Lancet, arguably one of the most respected medical journals on the planet, the World Health Organization announced that glyphosate is a probable human carcinogen, meaning it probably causes cancer in humans, not maybe causes cancer in laboratory animals. That was a very bold kind of event, on their part. So, this is why the GMO story needs to be looked at. It's not just because it's trendy to eat non-GMO food, and it's not just trendy to be gluten-free. These two choices are hugely important for health because, inflammation is a cornerstone of all of our chronic degenerative conditions. As I mentioned, Alzheimer's, heart disease, diabetes, cancer. And according, again, to the World Health Organization, this is the #1 cause of death in the world, not just in developed countries anymore. It isn't infectious disease. It is chronic degenerative conditions. And the #1 player are our dietary choices. So food matters.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's insane that with that amount of deaths, globally and even in the US, that there's not more attention paid to this. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that this is not brought up as a bigger issue in the mainstream, although it's getting there, which is outstanding now because of the work that people like you do? But why isn't it out there yet when it's causing so much trouble?
It's a very good question, and I think, with all due respect, it's the answer is follow the money. The big agribusinesses generally are not providing non-GMO foods, and are still very much involved in wheat and other gluten-containing products, grains. So that said, they control advertising, they fund, what we see on media, and no one, although we're beginning to see here in the States that many big agribusinesses are putting out gluten-free foods now made with non-GMO ingredients. So it's really, really happening. I'm very, very pleased with what I'm seeing in terms of the availability of these choices. I attend these natural food expos. We have one in California, one in New York every year, where there are literally thousands of manufacturers, big and small, and you walk the aisles, and so many things now are gluten-free and non-GMO. So I think that there's a sea change happening right now. And, I think for those of us in the scientific community who are doing our best to get the information out, who, really just want people to have this information because it's good for them, I think, our work is now being substantiated and, buttressed by the fact that now business is taking advantage of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's powerful and it's very exciting as well. So could you give us a quick rundown for the people that don't know, sugars, grains, carbohydrates, what effect is this having on our brain and our health in general?
Well, that's a heck of a question to ask because there's a lot of mechanisms that are involved. And I think, let's first start off with an area that I think is really hot right now, and that is the role of the gut organisms, the microbiome, in terms of our health. I alluded a few moments ago to the notion that there is this thing called gut permeability. Our gut lining is one cell thick, and it segregates the garbage dump inside the gut to everything else in the human body. It's one cell thick. It acts as a barrier. And the maintenance of that barrier is the job of certain gut bacteria. When we challenge those bacteria with GMO foods that are laden with glyphosate, with medications like antibiotics and non-steroid anti-inflammatory drugs and stomach acid blocking drugs, we kill off those good bacteria. They can't do their job anymore. And what suffers then is the gut lining. When the gut then becomes leaky, then various types of protein get out of the gut and into the systemic circulation and absolutely challenge the immune system. And that sparks a couple of things. It sparks inflammation and it sparks imbalance of immunity. So we get inflammatory disorders like the ones I've mentioned, and we get immune imbalance, and that causes autoimmune conditions like lupus and rheumatoid arthritis and type 1 diabetes and celiac disease. So that is really, I think, one of the ways that, to get back to your question, sugar and carbohydrates play their dirty role. Now, not all carbohydrates are bad. Certainly, a dietary fiber that is vegetable-based is, in fact, fiber made from carbohydrate. So in that regard, that's what we might consider a good carb. But that's not generally what people are eating. They're eating the sugar in all of its wonderful forms, whether it's honey or maple syrup or palm sugar or cane sugar or high fructose corn syrup. It is sugar. You know, people on Facebook will write me, "Oh no, I never eat sugar. I only eat honey that comes from bees that meditate for an hour a day." I don't care. It's sugar. Sorry. The only reason we like it is because it's sweet. We've got to get away from that. The damage done to your microbiome, to your gut organisms by sugar is vast and long-lasting. But incredibly, the damage that happens to your gut bacteria from consuming artificial sweeteners is even worse, which is the reason that people who drink diet drinks gain more body weight than people drinking soda. It's the reason if you drink diet drinks, has 0 calories, has no sugar, you more than double your risk for diabetes, which shouldn't happen because you're not drinking sugar. But that was recently revealed in a very extensive study that came out of Israel in both humans and in laboratory animals. So you can't fault them for that research. It was very, very profound. And we've known this for a long time. I mean, we've all seen people who drink diet drinks day in and day out and continue to gain weight. Now, the other mechanism by which sugar proves to be a bad thing for us is when we eat sugar, our blood sugar goes up. And when our blood sugar goes up, it binds to certain proteins in the body. And when it does so, it institutes a process called glycation of proteins and creates these products that are called AGEs, advanced glycosylated end products. And I don't mean to be too scientific, but the simple point is, when your blood sugar goes up because you're eating too much sugar, your sugar binds to protein, and that turns on inflammation yet again, and also leads to increased gut permeability, and also enhances the production of what are called free radicals, damaging chemicals that damage our fat, our protein, and even damage our genetic code, our DNA. So those sodas that you drink are damaging your DNA. They're damaging your gut bacteria. They're damaging your gut lining, increasing the permeability. So, you know, we often say to a woman when she's pregnant, you need to be careful what you're eating now because you're eating for two. Well, you know, each and every person watching this podcast has to understand that they are eating for 100 trillion. So the organisms that live within you eat what you eat. And when you think about that, when you sit down to your next meal, it will change the playing field a little bit in terms of your decision and your choices, and gets back to your question about why sugar. Because sugar changes their environment, and then they start to create inflammatory mediators that go to your brain, they go to your heart, they go throughout your body, they go to your skin. So it's really important that we nurture our microbiome, nurture our gut bacteria, and the way that we do that is to eat a diet that's much lower in sugar, that welcomes good fat back to the table, and that really features prebiotic fiber, a special type of fiber found in jicama, dandelion greens, garlic, onions, leeks, artichoke, asparagus. These are foods that have a lot of a specific type of fiber called prebiotic fiber that specifically allows the gut bacteria to do what they want to do and allows them to replicate. So those are the keys to a diet that works.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's fascinating. And what role does good fats play in helping you sort of combat inflammation and things of that nature, or brain health in general?
Well, good fats actually work on a couple of pathways. For example, we all hear that it's good to eat fish and take fish oil. Well, one of the main reasons that we like fish oil is because it's high in something called docosahexaenoic acid. Now you're impressed. DHA. Yeah. And the reason we want DHA is twofold. Number one, DHA is a powerful anti-inflammatory. So it is combating that mechanism that is so involved in our body degeneration. Number two, we know that DHA is a stimulator of a certain gene pathway. What DHA does is it turns on the gene expression for something called BDNF. And to make a long story even longer, the BDNF then goes on to signal your brain to make new brain cells. So what I'm saying is that fish oil, that's why it's a good fat, is very powerful in terms of enhancing the way your brain can make new cells, specifically in the brain's memory center. We know, according to a recent publication in the Journal of the American Medical Association, that DHA, the level of DHA in your bloodstream correlates with risk of dementia. Those who have the highest level of DHA have the lowest risk of becoming demented. So that's why you want to eat fish or take a DHA supplement. Olive oil, another terrific fat. We know that olive oil, in a recent study called the Predimed study, when added to the Mediterranean diet, reduced dementia risk by another 40% on top of what the risk was reduced by already on the Mediterranean diet. Another 40% risk reduction. Coconut oil, another good fat. Why is it good? It's good because coconut oil helps to enhance the body's ability to burn fat and use a specific type of fat that we call ketones. So, I mean, the literature on coconut oil being good for the brain is brand new. It was just published 3,000 years ago in the Vedic texts. In Ayurvedic medicine, it said eat coconut oil and it'll be good for your health and be good for your brain.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. So I'm really quite fascinated. Obviously, brain health is so important, and I know I love how you've done so much study on Alzheimer's disease, and it's a terrible disease, and it's one that hopefully we can avoid at all costs. But are you basically saying that if we can shift our diet, add in these good fats, eliminate the carbohydrates, sugars, etc., that we can avoid Alzheimer's disease completely almost?
No, I wouldn't say completely. I don't think that you can ever say completely about anything except for death and taxes. But, I will say that well-respected researchers are showing that Alzheimer's is significantly reducible in terms of its threat, in terms of its incidence, for example. We know that Dr. Melissa Schilling, who's oddly enough, a professor of business at New York University. Bring that. You got to bring that in. I haven't actually seen my new book, and hear my wife say hi. Come on.
Hi there.
There it is. It just arrived. I've not seen it. It's is that why you're opening a bottle of wine? Oh my gosh. There it is, folks.
Come on in. You said it here first, folks.
Where you get first dibs. There you go. The Grain Brain Whole Life Plan. Take a look at that tree
looks
right
amazing.
There. Great. And we're drinking. There you go. So where was I?
We're talking about eliminating Alzheimer's, and there was a
yes. So what I would encourage your I think people love the impromptu part of this stuff, by the way.
Absolutely.
What I would encourage your listeners to do is if you give them a link to my blog site, which is drperlmutter.com, there's a wonderful interview I did with Melissa Schilling. And again, as I mentioned, she's a professor of business at NYU, New York University, and demonstrated through her research that diabetes, which is preventable, and if you cannot become a diabetic by choosing to eat right and exercise right, you've reduced your risk of Alzheimer's by half. Half. Now, here in America, we have 5.4 million people already diagnosed with that disease, which has no cure whatsoever. And here, a business professor is telling us that you can reduce your risk by half. Now, another study that appeared in The Lancet by Dr. Deborah Barnes at University of California, San Francisco, demonstrated that other lifestyle factors can also reduce your risk for Alzheimer's by at least half. And they include things like exercise and, again, keeping your blood sugar low, not smoking, etc. So, this is a very intriguing time where researchers are making it very clear that this is a preventable disease, certainly not 100%, at a time when we have no treatment. Why are we not making that information known? It does take your breath away, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really curious to know, I'm fascinated by the brain-gut connection, and also how food and nutrition affects your mental and emotional state. And, I love to test different foods on myself and literally see how I feel and how my body's reacting. And I'm very sensitive to certain foods and eliminate things. And I know that it has a massive effect on people's well-being. And we have, high amounts of anxiety and depression in Australia, and I'm sure in the States as well. And I'm wondering, with your research, what have you found in regards to the nutrition and foods that we eat and the effects that it has on depression, anxiety, mood stability, and emotional stability?
It's a great question, and you're asking a lot of great questions. First, we can look at the effects of foods on our mood in a more direct way by looking at foods in terms of what they supply to the human body that may then have a bearing on mood. For example, foods that are high in tryptophan, milk and figs, for example, that then provide tryptophan that can be used to make serotonin, which has an effect on mood. But by far and away, the way that food goes on to affect our moods is mediated by the gut bacteria. So when we look at our foods through this new lens, through the lens of how it affects our gut bacteria, and then want to explore an area like mood, for example, that gives us a lot more information and really gives us a lot more areas that we can leverage to really come up with some ideas. So here's what we do know. We know that the so-called neurotransmitters, I mentioned serotonin, dopamine, GABA, epinephrine, for example, by and large are manufactured in the gut. And it turns out, and those are mood balancing and related neurotransmitters, obviously. It turns out that, again, most of these are made in the gut, and that the gut bacteria play a pivotal role in how these chemicals are manufactured. We know that markers of inflammation are dramatically elevated in depression, as are markers of gut permeability, which is called lipopolysaccharide. As a matter of fact, I have a graph of that in my last book, which is called Brainmaker. So we know that lipopolysaccharide, or LPS, which is a marker of gut permeability and inflammation, is much higher in major depression. So we're now recognizing that depression is a prototypic inflammatory disorder. We need to look upon depression as an inflammatory disorder. Interestingly, the SSRI, the class of antidepressant medications that have become so popular, Paxil, Prozac, Zoloft, probably the same names in Australia, correct?
Yes.
They work to increase the availability of serotonin, but it turns out that SSRIs are also anti-inflammatory, and that might be why they work. So it's very interesting information. We know that when people have a disturbed gut and a disturbed gut bacteria, for example, when they have inflammatory bowel disease, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, they have very, very high rates of depression and actually cognitive decline as well. And for years we thought, well, they're depressed because they have Crohn's disease, and who wouldn't be? But now we know that the reason more likely that they have issues like depression and anxiety is because of the changes in the gut bacteria and the permeability that goes along with that. So, these are the gut bacteria that make some of our B vitamins, that make vitamin K, and that these vitamins have a role to play in mood and in terms of acting as cofactors in the manufacture of various chemicals in the body. So it's a very exciting time to understand that probiotics are now being looked at in terms of treating depression. That Dr. Emran Mayer at University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, recently published a book and has done a lot of work in demonstrating how this happens. He actually took a group of around, I think it was 21 women, and divided them into some that got a probiotic. There was a yogurt that they would eat for a month along with other foods. They either got the yogurt, or they got a yogurt that had no probiotics in it, or they got nothing, or they got no additional yogurt. And they found that those women who ate the yogurt that was infused with active cultures of probiotics had changes in their brain MRIs in terms of areas of the brain that lit up. Now that is, and these areas had to do with mood regulation. So what Dr. Mayer demonstrated was giving people food that contained probiotics changed the chemistry and, more importantly, the functionality of their brains, changed the way they viewed the world. Amazing. Wow. Yeah. So when you think of the trauma that people are experiencing with their microbiomes because of the food choices that they're making and the drug choices that they're making, and the fact that there's glyphosate, this herbicide, on the foods you're eating, and that's traumatic to the microbiome, it's no wonder that there's such a huge explosion of mood disorders, anxiety, and depression globally, because it's coming from the gut. Everybody's heard the term, I have a gut feeling. We know that. That's been around a long time. Now we've connected the dots and we fully understand the mechanism. Yeah,
it's amazing. It's amazing. And we can only hope that it gets out there even more so, because there's so much we can clearly do. And it's incredible that it's in our hands. It's our responsibility right now to just shift our food, shift our eating, and it can literally, like you said, change your reality and change your world. I think that's so special and a message that needs to get out there. It's incredible. It blows my mind.
Think about that. Changing your food changes your perception of the world around you. It's breathtaking. Yeah. Let me just finish up on depression a little bit, because there's one other idea. How are we doing on time? Are we limited?
No,
Unlimited. Okay, because I only have 3.5 more hours. I don't have a watch. I'm just kidding.
Love it.
But one thing that I think is really very, very important, and I think will help a lot of people, and that is when magnesium level is low, it paves the way for depression. So magnesium deficiency is really prevalent in developed countries that are growing their foods in factory farms, food in soils that are depleted in trace minerals like magnesium. So I would just give your listeners and viewers that one other bit of advice, and that is to think about taking a magnesium supplement, whichever one you like, because our food is fairly devoid in magnesium these days, and it can relate to headaches and depression and sleep disorders and fatigue and gastrointestinal issues. So keep magnesium really in your the top of mind here, because it's really very, very important.
Amazing. Thank you for that tip. I'm sure we'll get a lot of value from that. Definitely. So I want to ask you, people watching right now, they might be thinking, I've spent 30 years eating crap. I've been eating sugars. I've been eating pizza every night, whatever it is, right? Can we reverse the effects via shifting our diet and adding in these supplements that we need right now?
Absolutely. Really compelling research from Dr. Lawrence David at Harvard has demonstrated that, in fact, that the microbiome, the gut bacteria, change in 3 days once the diet is changed. So, typically we see dramatic changes in adults that happen in 2 to 3 weeks. And they are so compelling that it gives people, I say, look, I need you to give me 2-3 weeks at the most, and then we'll get back together and see how you're doing. And if they can commit to that then they can see the changes. And then because they're feeling so much better, that reinforces their dedication to being on such a program. And in children, gosh, sometimes it's days when you make dietary changes. You bump up the magnesium, add in some vitamin D, some essential fatty acids, and good probiotics, and add in fermented food that is fermented, like kimchi, kombucha, kefir, yogurt, fermented fruits and fermented vegetables, fermented meats, etc. These are foods that are teeming with probiotic organisms, good organisms. Kimchi is hugely popular now around the world because it tastes good, it stays in the refrigerator forever and a day, and it's loaded with good bacteria. So I think the take-home message here is don't give up. Every journey begins with the first step, and make that step today. And also, halfway measures only work halfway. So if you're going to do it, go in with both feet. The biggest and most life-threatening, I think, misconception here is that while we are talking about welcoming good fat back to the table and lots of olive oil, coconut oil, grass-fed beef, nuts, seeds, free-range chicken, etc., that whole thing will work against you unless you simultaneously cut the sugar and carbs. If you're pounding the carbs or artificial sweeteners, and then think just because you saw Dr. Perlmutter or somebody else tell you that you should eat more fat, you're going to make things worse. So, but there are plenty of great resources to eat, to learn how to cook. I know that my good friend Pete Evans has a brand new cookbook coming out, and I just reviewed it the night before last. Awesome way to eat low carb, low sugar, higher fiber, high fat, and a lot of people are writing great stuff about it.
Absolutely. Pete's doing some amazing work over here. It's outstanding. So I've got a question from a client, actually, which is she's an amazing woman and a listener, and she's read all your books, by the way. So she's a big
Oh, great.
But she asked the question, if you have a loved one who's recently been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, what daily protocol of supplements would you put them on in conjunction with a clean diet of 0 grains?
I'd say that supplements are critical. We'll get there in a minute. But the first steps are you've got to cut the sugar and the carbs, processed carbs today, and add in lots and lots of fat, especially coconut oil and olive oil. That's job one. Job two, make sure to add in a lot of prebiotic fiber. Number three, fundamentally important, is aerobic exercise, at least 20 minutes every day. Work by Dr. Kirk Erickson at the University of Pittsburgh has demonstrated regrowth of new cells in the memory center and reversal of cognitive decline in people who simply exercise. Now, when it comes to nutritional supplements, I'd recommend the following. Turmeric, which is actually an herb. You can add it to your food, but you can buy that as a nutritional supplement as well. DHA, as I mentioned before, fish oil, krill oil, algae-derived DHA, or eat a lot of cold water fish. At least 12 to 1,400 milligrams of DHA per day. Lots and lots of vitamin D. Now, that could be 5,000, could be 10,000 international units a day. But how do you know? You know because you get your vitamin D level checked. And you don't want to really be in just the middle of the normal range. You want to be in the optimal range. I don't know the units that you use in Australia, but here in our units, that would be the normal range is 30 to 100. So if you have a 31, you say, well, I'm in the normal range. That's terrible. You want to be up close to 100.
Yeah.
Other nutritional supplements I think that are no less important would be magnesium. Magnesium plays a major role in more than 300 enzyme systems in the human body. A lot of those have to do with keeping our blood sugar where it needs to be, which, as I mentioned, is job one for keeping your brain healthy. So I'd say a magnesium supplement would be something you really want to look at. And there will be, in the next couple of years, probably next year here in America, I don't know when it's going to happen in Australia, but something called whole coffee fruit extract, which has also been shown to amp the growth of new brain cells. Whole coffee fruit extract. So those would be the key players. And certainly you want to take a good broad spectrum probiotic supplement. If it's organic, that's a plus. If it's non-GMO, obviously a plus. There's some really good probiotics now on the market, so I would add that to the regimen.
Thank you so much. Brilliant.
Sure, absolutely.
So, David, we're about to wrap up, but people that are listening, you've got a wealth of knowledge. It's been an incredible interview, by the way. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge.
Oh, my pleasure. I love it.
And like I said, you're doing some amazing work. Where can our listeners and viewers get your new book and find out more about what you do so they can start implementing some of these amazing strategies?
And again, here it is. It just arrived. There's my new book. You didn't have to make a graphic for it, called The Grain Brain Whole Life Plan. Now, I don't know when the book hardback will be available in Australia, but it's available in Canada, England, and United States in a couple of weeks, but people can pre-order it now. I think as an ebook, it's available. It'll be available in Australia very, very soon. I think in the next couple of weeks. Download as a Kindle. And the thing is, what people should do is when you do that, then go on my website, which is drperlmutter.com. And with your new, when you get the book, you let us know that you got the book, and we will send you a password to get open up my program, my television program, which is called Brain Maker, or rather Brain Change. And that's something we had here on public television. But I would also encourage your viewers to go to my website, drperlmutter.com. Why? Because it is extremely robust in terms of for scientific information. You can search our site, and we don't just have the abstracts. We have full PDFs of all the articles that I use in my research. I have a lot of video blogs, and I also do a lot of interviews, which is called The Empowering Neurologist. We do an interview every week with thought leaders, much like this, from around the world. The other place to follow me would be David Perlmutter, MD, on Facebook. And I do a lot of live Facebook interviews, which I think are really a lot of fun. I did a few. I think I did one. I certainly did one from New Zealand. Might have done one from the Opera House in Sydney. I'm not sure, but I do those about once a week as well. They're a lot of fun. They're totally off the cuff, like our interview. So I think people have a lot of fun with that. I'm hoping there's a lot of good information there too.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, David, thank you so much again for joining us. It's been an incredible interview, and again, keep getting this message out there because it's definitely needed and you're doing a terrific job. Thank you so much for joining us on UI Radio.
Thank you, Andy. I sure appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thank you.